Welcome, everyone. On behalf of College Buys, thank you for joining us today. We're happy to have you here for an informative session focused on automating spending processes featuring Tammy E.G. from SAP Concur. Your presence here amplifies the importance of these discussions, and we're grateful for your participation. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat or Q&A features, and we'll address them during the Q&A session afterwards. Now, let's dive into this engaging dialogue and uncover pathways to managing college-wide budgets. I'll now turn it over to Tammy.
Thank you so much, Tricia. Hello, welcome, and thank you to College Buys and Foundation for California Community Colleges for putting on this webinar and allowing us to present some solutions to managing more with less by making smarter spending decisions. As Tricia said, my name is Tammy E.G. I'm a senior solutions consultant with SAP Concur. I've been with Concur for 5 years. Prior to coming here, I was a client for 3 years. I was an AP analyst, and I was their travel, expense, and credit card administrator. I also wrote and enforced the travel and expense policy, and I even dabbled in the invoice world a bit. Now, I did not work for a college, but I did experience the same types of issues, and that's how to most effectively collect and utilize data to make informed financial decisions. I want to start with sharing something with you that we can all relate to, and that is aspiring for large purchases, such as a car or possibly a home, and what it takes to achieve this. So about 5 years ago, my husband and I had decided it was time to purchase a home. We've been renting for several years, and the time was right to own again. So we had to have a plan for the down payment. Have any of you possibly, purchased a home recently or know someone who did? And if you have, you probably can imagine or know that this is not a small amount that needs to be saved for. So my first thought was to create a budget and start limiting what we spent. However, I started to get a little bit frustrated because this was not going to be a one and done budget. My husband is commission only, and so his income fluctuates quite a bit. And the budget process became a very manual process each and every pay period. Then, on a side note, I started to get a little bit frustrated because I was being told by the budget, thus myself, that I had to stop spending on things I wanted, such as getting my nails done. Like many of those in your university, we have different spending views in our home or philosophies on spending and savings. My husband's a little bit of a spender. I tend to take my time to think twice before spending, but we need to find ways to bring us all together, whether it's professionally or personally, so that we can get what we want. I decided I had to change my perspective or my approach and not create a spending budget, but have a savings plan. I figured out what we needed for the down payment, and then I worked backwards with the time frame that we had to work with. Making sure that this was a win, not just for myself or that the data worked for me, but it also was a win and worked for my husband and that he understood it as well. Now, our income was going to stay the same, and we still had the same bills to pay, but we had to do more with it. We needed to see not only what we were spending, but what we were saving, and have the visual of increased savings so that we could make smarter financial decisions. I was dealing with issues of cutting back in savings and making personal financial decisions. The technical colleges, community colleges, and educational institutions of learning are dealing with some similar issues, such as their budgets. What is being spent where? And then there's larger issues, such as financial fraud and lack of insight into control. Ensuring that you're not in the paper, because you are a known and trusted part of the community, and you're providing trusted educations and paths to the future. And these concerns all seem to stem from a lack of insight into data. Now, it's no wonder that insight is an issue with all of these paper, manual, and decentralized processes we see here. Taking a look at some of these manual processes that may exist within a college is maybe duty of care, knowing where your people are. This is important. If something were to happen, you need to know where to get to them. Expenses might be done through a banking program. Maybe it's on Excel or a paper form that has receipts stapled to it in many different directions. But it all boils down to there's a pain of reconciliation and reimbursement that's being felt by the college's staff. And it brings up the question with the manual, is there a high confidence that spend is policy compliant? Mileage, how do you track it? There may be some kind of pre-spend request that needs to be done. Are these forms done on paper and then stuck in a cabinet? Or maybe they live online in someone else's computer somewhere. And then there's accounts payable, invoices. These may be passed around desks or emailed back and forth for approval. Manual data entry is then needed to get this information into your ERP before a check run can even be done for payment. Different departments could use different systems or processes. At one time, these manual processes were great, but now they are typically operating independently in silos, providing no overall visibility. And it's not a simple experience and requires a lot of manual time-intensive work for the end users and your back office. All of these time-intensive, paper-based processes that exist in silos are really introducing errors due to the manual data entry aspect. That means staff and leadership can't trust the data fully, which forces them to be more reactive to issues instead of thinking strategically. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel a little bit stressed just looking at all of these bubbles and different processes and the different things that need to be done. If we're feeling that way as the back office, how do you think your end users are feeling about these processes? Because this is not only about your back office, it's also about the end user experience as well. Because when we have good talent, we want to make sure that we retain that. So we've talked a lot so far about the data and the financial needs of the college. But that's not the only issue with manual decentralized processes. Like we just talked about, it's also about the end user. And there are typically divergent goals between the administration and the members of the faculty and staff. Faculty and staff are looking for a solution that saves them time and works with their lifestyle. They're looking for ease of use and the flexibility to manage these processes, not only from their computer, but maybe from a tablet or mobile device. They're looking for a painless process to file expenses in minutes, not hours. To be able to get approval for payment of an expense report or an invoice without having to chase people around campus, or looking for that signature or placing it on someone's desk and just fingers crossed and hoping they get to it. In general, they want improvements that move beyond the heavy manual data entry and approval process of the past. Now, the administration is looking for a completer and more accurate picture of the college's spending, whether it's expenses, vendor payments, or possibly travel related. They need to see spending in real time to better understand and manage the college's budgets. You are looking for the rules to be followed and the policies that the college has agreed upon to be put into action. Lastly, you're looking to save money, identify areas of improvement, and maximize rebates, possibly cashback on credit card programs. Overall, to gain a consensus with the various stakeholders, the solution must be a win for both. Now, automation can really be broken down into 3 steps, okay? When it comes to these different processes we've been talking about. And these 3 things that we need to automate are really capture, process, and pay. Now, capture is about accurately capturing spend, where, when, and how it happens. Moving on to process, what is that? It's not only the process as to how do we capture that information, but it's also other things like what's the process for approvals and workflows? How do you get your approvals? I know at one point in my career, we had an invoice approval system, and this was supposed to automate the process of emailing invoices for approvals through our multi-level organization chart. It did email these invoices through the email chart. However, it was not automated at all. I would spend hours every week making manual changes and updates to that email organization chart to make sure it was up to date. I'll tell you, this process didn't save me any time. So what's the process for things like auditing expense reports or spend? Are you matching Excel expense reports to the many different receipts that are taped to another piece of paper in all these different directions so that everything fits onto one paper? And then once you manually audit these receipts against the Excel spreadsheet, are you then handing it to the next person who needs to approve, and then they're doing the same thing? How about invoices? How are those getting approved and coded? Is the geocoding being written on them and then manually being entered into your ERP system? What's the process for storage? Where's it all being stored? The file cabinet? Are you scanning it and it lives somewhere in a computer? Is it maybe in boxes down in the basement? How many places is storage really happening? And then that brings us to our pay. How are payments being made? Credit card, check, payroll, ACH wire, list goes on and on. There's so many different methods to make payments. And how does this data then get into our general ledger? As we noted earlier, this is usually a manual process, often includes paper, email, or different systems. With so many different methods to capture, process, and pay, automation is the key to doing more. Having your data at your fingertips in order to make cost-conscious decisions, all while improving your end-user experience. Okay, I get that change can be difficult, but where do we start? Let's just start with capture. The only difference between expenses and invoices is that expenses are personal. Your staff and employees are relying on being reimbursed for that money to pay their own bills. But we still need to capture the data for both. That's the basic start of each. Earlier, we talked about manual paper-based multi-system processes and that the end user is just as important as the back office and administration's needs. But how do we make the capture process benefit both parties? Let's start that at the core of these different paper manual processes, it's about starting with capture. It's capturing the data for your spend. Here are just a few examples of some of the different kinds of data that can be captured for your financial reporting. Could be expenses, card spend, receipts, invoices, possibly mileage or travel plans. It could also be reconciliation. I'm sure you could even name many more. But how do you capture this data and what is the process? So I don't know about y'all, but does this type of expense report or invoice look familiar? Feel free to enter into chat if this does look familiar to you. I know it does to me. The question becomes then, does this look like it can efficiently help you make smarter spending decisions? It didn't to me when my previous organization started down the automation path. So how do we bring this into the age of technology and utilize the available technology to simplify this process? What if you could give your end users the option to capture receipt images and the available information provided on that receipt to just create the expense line item for them by utilizing OCR, or optical character recognition? This gives you the ability or them the ability to create and submit expense reports all from their phone. Our phones are with us all the time. So why should we have to go back to our computer to do what our mobile can? And then what if we gave approvers the ability to approve on their mobile phone as well? Now, you'll notice on this image that the receipt is for $33.60. Then there's a handwritten tip for $5. And the OCR, optical character recognition, was able to pick up the total amount of $38.60 for this expense line item, along with the date, the vendor, and the location, the pertinent information that's on the receipt already. And what this is doing is saving time for the end user. They're not having to type all this in. But the approver and back office benefit is less missing receipts. They can snap this picture while they're sitting there finishing their meal or whatever the expense is, and it captures that information. It no longer matters if that receipt gets lost or the dog eats it. The information is sitting in the system ready to go into an expense report. What about capturing mileage? This can also be done on your mobile phone using GPS and Google Maps. And this is allowing for accurate mileage capture. And the Google Maps is the backup. You just add it to the expense report. You'll notice here that there's 3 options on the image, the first image. There is a start option where they can just have a start-stop button when they start their mileage trip. You can also enter it manually, that to and from location. And then there's some drive settings where if I know that I'm going to drive Monday through Tuesday, 9 to 3, I'm always on the road, I can set it and my GPS is going to pick it up and just ask me if it's personal or business. And then it gives me the Google Maps for every one of these options as my backup for that mileage. Incorporating these technologies are a benefit to our end users because it's less keystrokes, which, to be honest, is just less mistakes. It's creating better compliance and more insight into spend for the back office and the administration. So as I mentioned, expenses and invoices are really just about capturing the data. So why not utilize OCR, that optical character recognition, for invoice data as well? All the information that's needed is provided on the invoice you'll see over here on the right-hand side. So use the technology to capture that invoice information and fill it into the required fields within the invoice system to create the digital invoice you need. This is an example of what technology can do. From the image that we see on the right, you'll note that the vendor name, invoice number, and date are on that invoice, and it's been able to be moved over to your invoice system. And then you'll see here that there's an expense type that was assigned down on the bottom portion. You can assign expense types to a specific vendor. You can also have your GL codes for your ledger in the ERP system tied to each expense type behind the scenes. So now that information's all within that digital copy. Other header information such as tax, total, shipping, PO number when applicable are also available to capture and can be put in their invoice system. And then the invoice has the information like line item description, supplier part IDs, quantity, price, etc. Use the OCR to put that in there for you. Don't have to have a human typing it in. And I also want to point out our ability to auto-assign the invoice. For PO-related invoices, this could be the original requester name. For the non-PO invoices, this could be auto-assigned based off of a vendor. Maybe it's a default employee for a specific vendor, or you can go off the attention to field if that name is on the invoice, all giving you options to utilize technology to help with your invoice process. So when you simplify capture up front, then process and pay become easier. So what is your process for approvals and workflows? Is it maybe paper? This might be an exaggeration, but sometimes we feel like this. Is it utilizing interoffice email or mail system? Shove everything in the envelope, sign it, tell it where to go. That's useful, it works. However, at the end of the day, that stops, right? And we have to wait for them to come back and deliver it the next day. How about email? Well, why not? It's not paper. But how many of us walk away at the end of each day and say, I didn't even get through my email today? I know I say it more often than not. But approvals are necessary. Workflows can differ, but the concept is going to be the same. We need to approve for payment, whether it's invoice or an expense. Here's what a simple workflow looks like. The end user submits the report, then it flows to the approver. This could be a manager or maybe another approver, be a cost object approver. Then it goes to the final step, which is the processor. And that processor does that final check to make approvals before they batch it, or as I like to say, release for payment. By bringing the capture and process into one automated system, you're also giving the end user insight into things like where their report or invoice is within the approval process. You're giving them and your back office visibility into that workflow or audit trail and knowing when something's going to get paid without them having to call the office and ask where their expense report is. And then the staff is taking the time to look up which system it is, whose email might it be sitting in, or is it sitting on someone's desk? Compliance and control is also part of that approval process. Auditing for compliance is really like trying to find a needle in the haystack. So by bringing everything into one system, you're able to add that compliance and audit step as well. And then utilize technology to find those needles. And then you let your humans determine how they're going to handle them or adjudicate those issues that are found. We believe the key to a successful audit automation is ensuring that it's comprehensive and it has an end-to-end approach with great flexibility. We like to use a multi-tiered approach. This is systemic audit rules, prepayment audit, and then a post-payment audit or data and analytics. So starting with systemic audit rules, these are really things that are looking at your expense entry information before submission. And then you can push policy adherence or compliance with warnings, yellow flags, hard stops, which are like red flags, to correct behavior before submission even happens, so that you know that that submission is within policy for what those audit rules can check. And this is allowing less work for your staff and approvers. If we allow technology within the system to make those corrections and let them know there's mistakes, less that your approvers are having to look at your staff to verify or correct. So I would venture to guess when it comes into the prepayment audit that all of us have heard about the buzzwords AI and ML. artificial intelligence, and machine learning. But you may ask, how can this fit into audit? Well, they can assist with our prepayment audit, utilizing OCR, the optical character recognition we talked about, to look at and verify receipt data against the expense entry information. Now, this is data that's already on that receipt, the date, vendor, amount, etc., and having it check against what has been entered on the entry item for the expense. Again, why have a human review what technology can for us? Integrating AI and ML into your audit process to look for things that systemic rules can't look for, such as keywords, maybe something that's against policy like cigarettes or gift cards. The technology can also look for duplicate submissions. With cash and credit card transactions, duplicate submissions can happen, and they're not always intentional. Prepayment audit really is about ensuring that you stop the things that your organization does not want employees reimbursed for. This is your spend governance. And it's also just looking at what's right in front of us, because we're looking at one report at a time. If we go to this next tier of audit, now you're going to look at data post-payment, okay? This is looking at data and analytics in depth. Looking at the report data and analytics to possibly uncover potential anomalies and fraud. This could be things like round dollar amounts. Maybe someone paid cash for something, got some change back, but they submitted the reimbursement for the full amount before the change. Could be looking at things like, how often does a user submit a receipt just under the receipt limit? Post-payment analytics really give you insight into trends and behaviors. And this is giving you insight into things that maybe it's time to make some policy changes, or maybe it's time to have that chat with a user who's not quite following policy. It's really all about having visibility into your spend, and hindsight really does become 20/20 at that point. So the information has been captured, it's processed, and now it's ready to be paid. Payment is a generic term. We could pay our vendors, we could pay one-time suppliers, we could also pay our employees, or possibly those who aren't even on staff. We can facilitate payments through payroll, ACH, check, or credit card. The credit card options alone are numerous. We're seeing declining balance cards being used, and these are physical cards that you give to your users, and then you put a specific amount on that card when it's needed for them to spend, and then you zero out the card until they need to spend again. We're also seeing, when paying vendors, we're seeing a trend in third-party payment providers who can offer rebates for the payments. And then depending on your card strategy, there's options to pay with virtual cards. Or maybe it's time to review your rebate options with your current card provider. In my previous life, we wanted the accounts payable department to be one that added to the bottom line rather than just took away from it. So we increased our credit card program to include the virtual cards for our vendors, and we negotiated a better rate from our provider. And we were able to bring in that additional revenue with those rebates each and every year with this strategy. Just a little food for thought. But regardless of how you pay these payments, they still need to be captured in your ERP. And technology today allows for an integrated process to do this rather than manual entry, like this one we see here. This is how I used to create my journal entries, in an Excel spreadsheet, and a lot of copying and pasting into my ERP. But explore how technology of integration can lighten or even remove that manual entry for you and your accounting staff. The use of flat files, this would be for an overnight process into your ERP system, or using things like web services, APIs, and integrated connectors for a more real-time data integration can help achieve this goal with both expense and invoice. Automation and consolidation of the capture, process, and pay processes allow your institution to now have analytics or reporting, resulting in accurate data without having to slice and dice the information from multiple different systems. Reporting and analytics gives you insight into your spending, such as when fuel was purchased at a rental car location rather than refueling prior to returning the car, along with, are they being upsold GPS or insurance when it's not needed? Car rental is just an example of the type of data you get. You could have spend data for maybe office supplies. How many times are things, how much is purchased at Staples versus Office Max? Or maybe there's a specific flower vendor that you use. Would it be helpful for your procurement team to know these things? Like, where is the most supplies or flowers being purchased? Or which car agencies has the most money spent at them? Because now they can take that data and negotiate rates for office supplies or flowers or car or any of the items that you spend on. Because now they have the data at their ready and have the information they're armed with to get lower rates and discounts. So data is power, and it lets budget or fund and grant owners know where their leakage is against their budget. It could also let you know things such as duplicate expense data. This gives you insight into buddy meal duplicates. Or did an expense get expensed twice with different payment types or report names? There's many different reasons that something could be expensed more than once. It could be accidental, or it could be possibly fraudulent. Reporting and analytics gives you insight into trends and behaviors. Now, as a client, I used to use these reports for many different reasons. I would use them for policy changes, training, and the information allowed me to have some of those chats sometimes. But what it really did was allowed us as a company to be more proactive. Accurate data allows you to have confidence in your data, and all of those involved to be informed and aligned in making smarter financial decisions. So remember when we first started, I talked about saving for a house and how we had to change our thinking and become aligned. Now, because my husband and I found a method that worked for us and we were able to see our data and became aligned on how to do more with what we had and some months less, we were able to continue making informed, smart spending decisions. And now we're able to call this house our home. When making financial decisions, whether personal or professional, it's imperative to be aligned and to have confidence in your data spend analytics. Now, each of our journeys are going to be different, but I hope that I've left you with something that you can use to apply to your campus in order to achieve your financial goals. So if you'd like to learn more about how your institution can manage more with less, please reach out by using this QR code, and we'll make sure you get in contact with the correct person. I want to say again, thank you so much for attending today. And I'm going to hand it back to Trisha to see if we have any questions and then wrap up with final thoughts.
Hi, thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation. And yes, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat or the Q&A feature. I see we have one question already. Tammy, is there a minimum size of school that you will only work with? Minimum number of staff, students?
Great question. The answer is no, there is not. We work with any size, and we're able to right size the solution to your needs and your size.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then another question that came in, does SAP Concur work with all ERP systems? You don't have to have an SAP ERP, do you?
Excellent question. No, you do not. We are, what we like to say is ERP agnostic. So we are able to work with all of the ERPs.
Great. And then let's see if we can catch any last minute questions. Okay, I see another one popped up. Does a school have to purchase all of your solutions? Or can we keep it to just expense or invoice if that's all we need?
Yes, you can. I like to think of Concur as modular. So we are able to grow as you grow and provide the modules that just make sense to you and what you need.
Okay, great. And then let me just see if we have any other questions. If you have anything, you can pop it in the chat. I don't think I see anything else, but thank you for everyone who was able to have their questions answered. As we draw this discussion to a close, We want to extend our appreciation to each and every one of you for being part of this important conversation. I would also like to extend our gratitude to Tammy for her valuable insights and contributions. Should you have any questions about the College Buys Agreement with SAP Concur, please reach out to cbcontracts@foundationccc.org, and our contracts team will be happy to support. But otherwise, thank you for joining us, and until next time.